Hey, you guys. So, the first couple of years of my meditation practice, I did two main things. I went on a yearly retreat, sometimes twice a year, and that 10 days noble silence like profoundly boosted my practice. And when I returned home in everyday life, would practice for at least an hour a day. So I was like super committed to this mindfulness journey and learning meditation and evolving and growth, right? That's a lot of time and commitment on the cushion, and a lot of time and commitment in traveling and taking time off work and all of that sort of stuff. But I'll tell you, one of the most profound jump starters of my practice was when I finally took this practice off the cushion, off the mat, off those pristine conditions it was in. You know, nobody's bothering you, you're not stressed out, you put the outside world out, and that's easy. I'm gonna go in, that's easier to go in and do some deep dive work. But when I put this practice into everyday life, when I leaned into it, when I explored it, when I opened up the playground, the cross training playground of mindfulness in my everyday life, that was really when my practice caught on fire. And of course, right, because you're moving about the cabin in everyday life and stress hits you, and you're moving about the cabin in everyday life and you start to get more consistent in different playgrounds and training arenas and time zones and time frames, and different things are going on in your life, but you keep this practice. And it was just such a huge fire starter for me to my practice. And so practice in daily life, taking this off the cushion out into everyday life, this is where we know, like, where the rubber hits the road. Is this really helping? Is this really working? Was massively transformative to my life and to my practice and to how I relate to this practice. It brought different dimensions to life about this practice for me, practicing in daily life, being able to have conversations and be in the middle of a conversation, have a background practice and know, oh, I can hold the space for that. Knowing, oh, I have a life event, I can put a space, a buffer zone, a micro hit before and after to go into that event or that life experience a little bit more prepared, a little bit more grounded, a little bit more in my prefrontal cortex, not like rapid firing and offline and stressed out. And then coming out, what could I do and learn in that micro hit, coming out of it to like drop and leave any stress behind and also integrate that knowledge and that wisdom. Or how can I make best use of sitting in the car while I'm stuck in fucking traffic, right? So it's like a whole new world opens up to you in terms of practicing meditation and mindfulness in your everyday life with this. So I'm going to talk to you about how this works, this schema works. And this is from some things I've done and some things in terms of what I've learned through the Unified Mindfulness System. Because Shinzen as a teacher I've never seen anybody implement this as much in everyday life. I learned it haphazardly along the way, little bits and pieces, but it wasn't until I got to Unified Mindfulness that I was like, oh, they have a whole schema for this and they're not messing around. Like, they got this down, and the schematic is beautiful. So again, I always say, hold the maps and systems of each system lightly, do what works for you, and then gain the wisdom and just take the practices that work for you. So I'm going to invite you to do that here as well, because what you'll find is that even if you just start with one little thing, or you take one little nugget out of this and you implement it, you actually implement it, and it's a practice, you actually put it into practice, it will like open up the whole world for you to expand and let your practice catch on fire, the momentum catch on fire. So that when your body is craving sugar, or you're wanting that chocolate candy bar, or that person's stressing you out that's in front of you, you can go, oh, I got this. I don't have to slip into that habit pattern groove that I've slipped into 100,000 times before, right? Okay, so here's the nutshell. We can practice with either all of our attention and deep dive, saturated, all of our attention, this is the only thing we're focusing on kind of meditation. And we can do, I'm going to just throw like 10 or 20% of my attention and have a background practice of meditation running in the background, right? because I need to be paying attention to driving the car or being in this meeting or whatever, So the first thing you need to recognize is that you can put all of your focused attention, that's a great way to practice and learn and grow, in a meditative state. So you pick a meditation training method, tool, whatever you're using. See, hear, feel, vipassana, shamatha, samatha, metta, loving kindness, compassion, whatever the practice is that you choose. You're like, all of my attention, I'm doing this practice right now. It's taking all of my concentration power. This is where I want to be, right? And that's called a formal practice, where all of your attention is on that formal technique, and you're going to really work it. You're going to juice it. You're going to be there, present. Mind wanders away, come back. Mind wanders away, come back, right? And then the other way to practice is, I'm going to have this conversation, or I'm going to go into this boardroom meeting, or I'm going to be driving down the street, or I'm going to be playing racquetball, but I want to put like a background, feel rest, shamatha, calm abiding, into play practice, or a loving kindness, compassion if I'm having a conversation, a hard conversation. I'm just going to remember to have a little bit of my attention on the technique in the background, just a little bit of can I stay present with a little bit of the technique in the background. So that's a concept of formal, all of your concentrated attention goes to the practice, versus a little bit of your attention goes into a background practice that you practice as you work that practice. So there's formal, informal. And so this would be informal. You're like, I'm just informally moving about the cabin in my everyday life, but I'm going to stay grounded. It's like you're staying grounded you're connecting to the cord of presence. Just a little bit, 10, 20% here, right? Versus here, you're getting saturated in it. So formal, informal, background, foreground practice is one concept there. And then formal practice is you can do it in concentrated time frames, or you can do it in short, micro hits or micro doses. And in concentrated time frames, we do want to get concentrated in meditation. It doesn't have to happen on the cushion. It doesn't have to be a perfect ideal world happening around us, but it's 10 minutes or more in terms of, we do want formal saturated sitting periods, but we can also delve deep. Quickies are great. 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, up to the 10-minute mark a couple of times a day. And how this helps us is, you wake up in the morning and maybe you have this beautiful morning sit, and then you go out into the everyday world and you get stuck in a traffic jam, or you're late, or something happens, just your day happens, and you get kind of thrown off kilt and off whack. And you're like, I was in this pristine meditation this morning, but right? But then all these life things hit me. And then we build up the stress through the day, and we produce the cortisol and stress hormones and chemicals and blah, blah, blah. And by the time we come home at night, we're like, well, that was great. I did this morning sit, but I don't feel like it carried me through the day. Well, through the day, we just get thrown out of whack or out of balance. Our internal rhythms get thrown out of whack and out of balance. And so a little micro hit, 30 seconds here or there of calm abiding, staying present. We're grounding back to that cord, that deep, concentrated sensory clarity. It's that's always there. I can always connect to that. It doesn't have to be for long periods of time. And this is a way, I always tell people, do whatever kind of practice you can do, whether it's a bunch of micro hits through the day or 2 minutes of micro hits during the day, concentrated state. If you can't get on the cushion, it's a busy day, don't beat yourself up. Do what you can do. And this is how this practice meets you where you're at in your life situation, and how you can really get skillful. This is upaya, or skillful means, today's going to be a really hectic day, so I'm just going to pepper it with micro hits. So by the time I come home and walk in that door after work, what version of me comes home, right? Calm, present, grounded. I didn't build up all that stress every day. And also think about all the wasted time you have during your day. In that meeting where you don't really have to pay attention, or in that meeting, if you do have to pay attention, can I run a background practice? So formal, informal, deep concentration, 100% on the technique, or 10 to 20%, whatever bandwidth. You look at whatever bandwidth you have to use. In this moment, what bandwidth do I have in terms of concentration power? How much do I need to concentrate on life at hand? And how much can I absorb into a practice? Oh, well, not much is going on right now. I could juice this moment and get into a nice, deep, rich, juicy meditation. Or there is a lot going on and it's the middle of the day. So can I stop and do a super concentrated micro hit? Or can I just sit in the background, have a background kind of program running, that background connection, that chord to that practice, right? Or can I do a quick micro hit and then sink into that chord, And it's about playing in ranges. We're playing and turning up and down all the dials and the knobs of the three things: concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. So think about that. Concentration is, we're going to play with, what happens when I turn up my concentration on this technique versus turning it down and only putting a little bit of concentration on this technique. Sensory clarity, what happens to my body when there's a lot of concentration absorbed into this thing? How detailed and fine-grained and subtler can I get? But also, when there's just a little bit of concentration, I'm doing a background practice, what does that feel like too? What kind of sensory clarity? That's when like the contours sometimes come into focus and not the fine-tuned details come into focus of your sensory system, your sensory activity of what's going on. So an example of that might be the background practice. You're just noticing, there's kind of this ever-present flavor of activity or agitation, or I just feel a general like sense of momentum, or I feel it's like you're getting the contours of what's going on in your sensory system in general. So that maybe by the time you get home from your day, or you get to that next thing that you're doing, or you have time, you're like, I could skillfully put this into place for myself, or loving kindness compassion practice, or shamatha, feel rest kind of practice into place. And then the equanimity bit is, you're going to be playing all over the place. So your equanimity skills are going to be building too, because you're going to be like, I forgot I was doing a background practice, or can I hold the space of a background practice and still have a conversation and be present and notice, what's going on in my body, if there's any sense of flavor of feel rest or feel good or whatever, or what's going on in terms of holding that space of equanimity, not wanting to push or pull or craving or aversion, but just going with the flow of riding the wave of formal, informal, micro hits, background, foreground practice, just riding the wave of life with your practice, riding the wave of life with your practice. So this week I want you to play with it. Do some formal meditation sits on the cushion, and then do some formal meditation sits where you're running on the treadmill, all of your attention, see, hear, feel out, or Vipassana, or whatever it is, but be fully saturated in that concentration power, in that technique. You can do this while you're moving about the cabin, on a walk, out walking in nature, like get really curious, see out, and really fully delve in to absorb that see out of your walk. Notice, hear out, birds chirping, sounds in the air, visuals, whatever comes up, right? Or you choose today to be your micro hit day and you go, I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to use a little gym boss timer, or I'm going to put 10 pennies on the table. And every time I walk past the table, I'm going to put a penny from here to here, and I'm going to do a short micro hit, condensed, deep, formal practice for 30 seconds to a minute. And my micro hits today are going to be on feel good, self-compassion, loving kindness. I have 10 micro hits, deep, condensed practices today on feel good, for example. Whatever it is, you can pick the technique. You can pick how you count them down or how many you do. Or you can go, today I'm going to be playing racquetball with Joe, and I do have to pay attention to that. Or I'm going to be in a board meeting, or I have to give a presentation. So I do have to have most of my concentration power on that skill, that thing that I'm doing in daily life. So, let's see, maybe I could do a micro hit going in, a feel rest, let that feel rest wave, follow the contour of that feel rest wave, keep about 10 to 20% of my focus in the background and feel rest, stay grounded and present in my body, present in the moment as I give that presentation or as I sit in that boardroom meeting and hold that, a little flavor of that in the background. And when I come out of that, I could do another little micro hit or micro dose of like condensed 2 minutes of like loving kindness, compassion of like, fuck yeah, you just did that. And even if it wasn't it was a little bit sloppy or it wasn't perfection, you did it. Remember, there are no bad sits. This is your playground. You are learning to get skillful, to meet your own needs. You're learning to, in this practice, in any given moment of your life, to be at the helm in your own business, not leaving it to the haphazard outside world and just going, oh, well, I just got mad at Sally or Joe because I was I had a stressful day and it was a shit, that's going to happen sometimes. And we're going to get off kilt and be unconscious and do shit things because we're human and we learn and that's okay. And this is a process. But what if, instead of haphazardly being dragged around like a rag doll, we started to get skillful? Upaya, skillful means in our practice. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing this week. Play with it in any different flavor, shape, range, or form. Formal practice, informal practice. That just means formal practice, deep concentration, all in a technique for 10 minutes or longer. Or you could do a micro hit for 10 minutes or shorter, but all of your concentration, again, is on that technique. Or background, foreground practice. Have a background practice running in the background if most of your attention has to be in the foreground at the task at hand. And then get creative. How can I, as I move about the cabin in daily life, implement my practice of mindfulness to suit me, to help curate my life and support me and my life in my day-to-day movement about the world, about the cabin. So have a fabulous day. See you next week.